Racist bartender humiliates man, not knowing he's an undercover officer. What happens when you misjudge someone based solely on their appearance? Can a single moment of disrespect ripple out, changing lives forever? And when that moment comes, are we brave enough to confront the truth, or will we look away? It was a busy Friday night at a pub in a small town, a place where regulars lined the bar and newcomers stood out. Among them was Marcus, a calm, unassuming man with a soft gaze and quiet demeanor. Dressed in a simple jacket and jeans, he looked like any other man winding down after a long week. But Marcus wasn't there to relax. He was working. As an undercover officer investigating recent complaints of harassment and discrimination, he was here to observe quietly, blend in, and gather information. But tonight would bring more than he expected. From the moment Marcus took a seat at the bar, he noticed the bartender's stare. Carl, the bartender, tall and smug with an air of superiority, seemed to watch Marcus with something close to disdain. Marcus ordered a drink, hoping to ignore the piercing gaze, but Carl simply smirked and walked away. Marcus watched as Carl served other customers, some of whom had arrived after him, all with a bright smile and easy friendliness. But whenever Marcus caught his eye, Carl turned away with a dismissive roll of his eyes. It was Carl's problem? Did he think Marcus didn't belong here? Or was he so confident in his bias that he felt entitled to ignore a paying customer? Marcus observed silently, his patience waning with every ignored request. Finally, after waiting nearly 20 minutes, he spoke up, trying to keep his tone light, though frustration edged his voice. "Hey, do you think I could finally get my drink?" Carl turned, his smirk widening as he sauntered over to Marcus. With an exaggerated sigh, he grabbed a glass, filled it halfway with beer, and walked back over to Marcus with a sneer. But then, as Marcus held out his hand, Carl paused, staring him down. And in one swift, deliberate motion, he poured the beer over Marcus's head. The room froze. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by an uneasy silence. A few people exchanged shocked glances, and someone even raised their phone, filming. Marcus sat perfectly still, feeling the cold beer drip down his face. He clenched his jaw, struggling to maintain his composure. Inside, he was boiling. But he wasn't just a man at a bar. He was an officer on duty. Someone who had taken an oath to stay calm under pressure. How many others had faced this kind of humiliation here? And how many times had Carl gotten away with it? Carl crossed his arms, his smirk shifting to a mocking grin. "What, you think drinks are free just because you're here? Think again." Marcus took a deep breath, the weight of the situation settling over him. Revealing his badge right now would mean ending the investigation early and possibly alerting others who were under scrutiny. But at the same time, he couldn't just walk away. Not after what had happened. Not after being humiliated in front of an entire crowd. And how many people had already suffered here, forced to walk away because they felt powerless? He glanced around the pub, reading the expressions on people's faces. Some looked down, avoiding eye contact. Others watched, curious to see what he would do next. But none of them spoke up. No one challenged Carl. No one called him out. The silence was as loud as Carl's insult. Would he speak up for himself or let Carl's behavior slide? And if he let it slide, would Carl just do it to the next person? After a moment, Marcus reached into his jacket, pulling out a small notepad. Calmly, he jotted down a few notes, his pen moving steadily across the paper. Carl squinted, confused, trying to figure out what Marcus was doing. The other patrons leaned in, sensing something unusual. Finally, Marcus stood up, his voice low but carrying an unmistakable edge. "Carl," he said, his voice cutting through the silence, "do you know who you just poured beer on? The department's been receiving complaints about this place for a while now. You just made a big mistake." Carl's sneer faltered, his confidence cracking as the realization hit him. For the first time, he looked Marcus in the eye, searching for some hint that this was a joke. But Marcus's expression was cold, unreadable. The crowd watched, captivated, as Carl's arrogance slipped away, replaced by uncertainty. Marcus continued, his voice steady. "You poured a drink on me tonight, and I'll walk away. But what about the others you've humiliated? Are they supposed to just keep taking it?" He paused, letting his words sink in. "Think carefully before you answer, Carl." Carl stammered, searching for words, but Marcus didn't wait for an apology. He'd seen enough. This wasn't just about him. It was about the pattern of behavior that had gone unchecked for far too long. As he turned to leave, he could feel the weight of the crowd's eyes on him. Some of them nodded in silent respect, others shifted uncomfortably, as if they too felt the shame of having stayed silent. As Marcus reached the door, he paused, glancing back one last time. Maybe it's time you learn to treat people with respect, because one day, someone won't walk away. With those words, he left the pub, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Outside, the night air was cold, but it felt refreshing against his skin, washing away the humiliation he'd endured inside. Marcus took a deep breath, allowing himself a brief moment of anger before letting it go. He knew that justice would come, not tonight perhaps, but eventually, because as long as there were people willing to stand up and question the actions of others, there was hope. And as for Carl, how would he carry on after that night? Would he take a hard look at himself and his actions? Or would he ignore the warning, continuing down a path that would inevitably lead to consequences far worse than a confrontation in a bar? Only time would tell.
If you've watched this far, comment which country you're watching from and leave a 100 in the comments section, because you are type of person that likes to finish what they started. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to get notified whenever we drop new videos.